Hey guys, Deathbyphiw here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do a tier list for tanks after the mid-season patch in Season 9. So, stick around. Rein is an F tier. Rein is an F tier. That's the biggest news. Rein's not F tier anymore. I don't even think he's D tier anymore. And I'll start off with Reinhardt right off the bat because he got some buffs in the last patch. Yes, he's not meta. But I think, and don't kill me, I think he's C tier. Just C. I don't think there's any F tier tanks, just C tier. And hear me out. He got some buffs with his damage, with his E on PC. It's E, and he got some minor tweaks here and there with his armor. I think he's a little bit better, and I think he's viable in certain situations. But Dive is still meta. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think Rein is god-awful biggest throw pick in the world at the current moment. I think some maps, maybe on Eichenwald, situational, Reinhardt can work. So don't think you're going to lose the game if your tank goes Rein. It's not as good as Dive, but he's currently viable in certain situations, on certain comps. So you heard me out. Rein is not F tier anymore. There, I said it. He's not F tier. Maga C tier. Now, I think in the right hands, and if you play Maga appropriately, you can play him very well. I've seen some Magas in, low GM, low top 500 players right now. I think like Masters 3 or Masters 3 on tank is top 500. So most of my games in support are, I'm like Masters 4, Masters 3 right now, which is right below top 500, which is around Masters 1 for support. But my tank players are higher up on that echelon, and they're around like Masters 3, Masters 2, which is pretty much top 500 for tanks. I've seen some Maga players who are pretty solid GM top 500 players every single season playing Maga and playing them fairly decently. And even so now, a few days after this mid-season patch, he seems a little bit better with his buffs that he got, with his stomp damage and some of his survivability tweaks to his abilities. He's a little bit better. I had him at D tier, right above Rein. I think he's better than Reinhardt now. But he's still a very solid C tier tank and is not a complete and utter throw, because in my previous video for support tier list, which I'll tag at the end, Kiriko is meta now, and Ana got a little bit of buff. So that also kind of benefits Maga indirectly, as Kiri is the hard meta with a Lucio. Lucio directly benefits tanks like Maga and Reinhardt. Kiri directly benefits tanks like Maga when there's an anti-nade or something of that sort. It really does help him out. Whew. So I got that out of my system. You could crucify me in the comments, but I don't think these two are god-awful anymore. A little side note here with my Maga rating. In lower elos and beyond, I think Maga is definitely a very strong C tier tank. However, in higher elos, like top 500, people who know how to play Maga really well, like I said before, he's actually really strong. With his changes, his overhealth goes up by like 100 initially with his when he uses his overdrive. He just gets instant 100 health, and the buffs there have just made him survivability much better. And with the Kiri being hard meta again, it just, and the DPS passive decreasing by 5%, it just directly benefits Maga. And in higher elo play, I would put him in around A tier, but for the sake of this tier list, I'm keeping him at C tier. Just keep that in mind. I think in higher elo play, he's very good. He's definitely a solid A tier tank. And now back to your regular scheduled content. Moving on up the list, I'm going to put Junker Queen at B tier. She just works in certain situations. Her ultimate's really good. She does quite a bit of damage. And her knife, just with the projectile size changes, I feel like I see some Junker Queens now really excel with her knife to be able to grab targets and just delete them. So if you get somebody who's really good on Junker Queen, you know, you're not doing wonderfully compared to dive tanks, but you can do a pretty decent job. I think like I've seen Junker Queen play well on push maps. I feel like that's really like her bread and butter right now this season. Like push maps really do help her out quite a bit. It forces the fight onto one area and fighting around a bot and keeping things closer. So situational in a way, but you could make Junker Queen work in most situations. Another B tier tank, and I'll say this because I know dive is meta, but in just literally 2 patches, Ball has dropped down to B tier. Dive is meta, but Sombra got some pretty serious buffs, which makes her a lot stronger, and that directly affects Ball. Ball is hard countered by Sombra, and you know, it just makes him a bit weaker. Now Sombra is just going to be played even more than what she was before. And I'll do a DPS tier list probably the day after I release this one. You should check that out. But you know, those kind of buffs to heroes like that directly affect Ball. I think Ball is a really good pick. He's not terrible, but he's not just like god awful like he was in previous patches. But he's moving down that tier list. He's moving down. So, you know, it is what it is. He's not a throw, and he can work really well in certain comps, but not as strong as he was before. I'm going to put Sigma in B tier as well. You really need to be skilled to play Sigma to make him, you know, to make him work more with the meta today. His shield is great. His ult is good. His damage and poke is really good, but you know, the DPS meta, and now as the season gets further and further along, more people are just playing Tracer, Sombra, Genji, and it's really hard to effectively do much on Sigma with that situation on DPS. And then people are playing dive tanks. You know, you get like a Ball, a Diva, a Winston, a Doomfist. Like, it just makes it really difficult to run Sig. Other than that, like, he's pretty decent. And if you play him well, you can make him work and excel on him. I don't think he's bad, but not as good as he was in previous patches. These next ones are really hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to S tier tanks because I think I need to get those off my plate. Winston and Doomfist. 2 S tier tanks. Doom got a buff. I think Doom in high elo is absolutely bananas. It's broken. He's S++ in high elo. Maybe not so much in metal ranks. Obviously, you need to get good with Doom to play him well, and that's the caveat to Doomfist. You have to be good with Doom to do anything with Doom. So, in a higher elo perspective, Doom is S tier. If you're not playing him in high elo, he's like B or C tier, simply because he's a very difficult hero to master. So keep that in mind. I have Doom at S tier with the idea of higher elo players playing him. Winston is a bit easier to play, but you know, hard to master because you can get deleted rather quickly if they do counter you. Run a Reaper, run a Bastion, run a Sombra to hack them, whatever it may be. Keep that in mind. But Winston is very solid S tier, right behind Doomfist. I think Doomfist is by far the best tank in the game, especially at higher elo. His ult buff was unnecessary. I mean, the thing that makes Doom not good in lower elo is the fact that he's hard to play. And that's that. That's it. It takes hard to master certain heroes. And he's one that, you know, you need a lot of game knowledge, a lot of experience to get really good at. And that's fine. But he didn't need the ult buff, but he got it, and it is what it is, and it's much harder to play against him now, and he's doing a lot of work. I feel like I always am playing against a Doom or a Winston. And Winston's really good, obviously, as well. His ult is a second life. His shield helps him out. His dive, comboing with other dive DPS, is just such a great combination, and these two are just the king on tank. A tier tanks, I think D.Va is A tier. I had her previously in S tier, but with the buffs to Doom, I think it moves her down just a notch. She's definitely very high A tier, and her ultimate is a second life as well. And she has a lot of, you know, utility to help out the team. She do quite a bit of damage. The issue with her moving down is dive is just becoming more and more meta. Like, the tracer nerfs weren't enough. The Sombra buffs pushed it even more towards dive, and you're seeing less Sojourns, less Soldier 76, less Cassidy's in solo queue play than you were previously. So the mid-season patch definitely changed that. She's still really good, but her viability goes down a bit because of that change in the DPS meta. It's pushing more and more towards dive being hard S tier. This might be questionable, but I think Ramatra's A tier. I think he's low A tier with Lucio Kiri. Those two directly benefiting Rush, in my opinion. Being able to enable your Ramatra with your speed boost on Lucio, and having a Kiri Kitsune Rush and just have Ramatra go balls out, fist, ulting is just really strong. I would obviously prefer to be running a Winston or a Doomfist if you play them well over like a Ramatra. But I would toss them up and say, like, I don't care if I have a D.Va or a Ramatra on my team. Maybe I prefer Ramatra more. But over the rest, definitely Ramatra in my opinion, but dive still is king. I think Hog is low B tier, high C tier. A direct counter to Ball and Doomfist. He can hook them and try to take them out of the fight, so that really bumps them up. But Junker Queen does really well against him, and Sig can do quite a bit against him as well. So I put him at like a C+, B-. So I'll keep him here. I try to keep things balanced in my tier list and not have too many in one, but he's definitely like a C+. And, you know, maybe that changes in future patches, but that's where I think he's at right now. I think D tier tanks. I honestly, I just don't think Orisa works in the current meta. She's C-, D+. She's like trying to keep balance here. She's not great. She's not god awful. She's definitely more situational. You can counter Doomfist with Orisa, but it's like there's so many better options to play. I would put her in C tier, and for the sake of the tier list, I think we need to have one D tier tank. I think in a tank perspective, like this is my tier list comparing tanks to one another. Orisa is probably the worst tank in the game right now, and that's what it is. I mean, I don't think she's bad. I just think she's definitely more situational, and you just not a solid pick in the current situation, the current meta. And last but not least is Zarya. I think she's C tier. But low B tier. High C tier, low B tier. So she would be like a B- or C+ as well. Same situation as Hog. She's definitely more situational. She can shut down a D.Va. She could do really well against a Junker Queen because she's, you know, kind of a bit of a counter to Junker Queen. But she doesn't do well against Doomfist, in my opinion. I don't think she does phenomenally against Ramatra. I think she just does okay. You know what? I'll put her into B tier. I'm thinking about it, I'll put her up into B tier because she could match up well against Junker Queen and do okay against Ramatra and really take D.Va out of the fight. And, you know, she's very low B tier, B-. Well, that's my tier list for tanks. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm curious to hear what you think. This is a little bit hard to do a few days after the mid-season patch. I'm trying to get my grasp around things here. And if I made a mistake, let me know. If you think I'm egregiously wrong, you know, okay, sorry. I try my best. But this is my tier list. I hope you like it. And as always, happy gaming.